So today I woke up to a video that made me very upset. I felt feelings of anger towards this person that made it, but then outside of that, I felt very small and I felt a lot of anxiety and pressure. And I felt like I was revisiting my childhood days all over again, and I did not like it. And not only did I not like it, and it triggered in me emotions that I'm healing from, but it put me in a place of just feeling a very heavy-hearted empathy for these people who are going through this, these children that are being subjected to this. So I'm going to address the video in parts, much like the administrator addressed it to the children, and then that way it makes the most sense regarding where I think this is so wrong. I'd like to know if this administrator passed this through her supervisors and higher ups before enacting this, because she did not. It has come to my attention since then that she did not provide this video to parents and did not invite them to be part of the process or even know that it existed. And that concerns me, because there should always be 100% accountability and transparency. And when it comes down to her licensure, I feel like she should be accountable and transparent. And honestly, I feel she should be disciplined in this measure, because the harm done to these students' well-being and disrespect and a removal of their rights, no. And I'm also urging you as parents, going forward, I'll just address that now, to contact your state administrators, maybe even your local lawmakers. The ACLU of Utah, I think, would maybe be somebody to get in touch with, as well as Equality Utah, because there are some rights being violated of students that maybe have other needs that other students don't. There's a list of things that go on here, and I encourage you as parents to speak up, because I'm going to speak up here, and I'm going to, ask that you share this video far and wide, and let's get it out there and let's get something done. But I am asking you to do your part on that end, because you have to. You have to advocate for your children. They're depending on you. So I'm going to not name the administrator, because I feel for legal purposes and boundaries, it would be in my best option to not state their name. But I am going to state the school and the school district in which this problem resided. So this was Uintah Middle School in Vernal, Utah, and it is the principal who created this video. So that said, this principal, I'm just going to go in segments, I guess, and talk about each thing. I'm trying really hard. I've got a set of notes, so when I keep looking down, that's why, because I'm trying really hard not to forget some key points that my children and other teenagers I spoke to brought up, and then also other adults that I spoke to. They also had concerns, and so I wanted to address those fairly and in their entirety. So I'm just going to start with the beginning of school. The beginning of school, it said that there's not to be any loitering in front of, or inside the school rather. They're to grab their books, they're to get a book, and they're to go to the classroom and read. So while I understand that you want to get kids to class and that, this is the case, technically speaking, until that bell rings and they're supposed to have a butt in the seat, I don't know that you have a right to force them to be anywhere necessarily. Those kids need a minute to breathe before they embark on a very busy day. I'm sorry, my foot is itching. Before they embark on a very busy day that's going to require and demand a lot of them physically, emotionally, mentally, and so many other different ways that we can't even begin to account for. And also there are grown adults who need that moment as well, the teachers, the staff, everybody else. So we should all be taking that, period in between when school starts to revamp, get our brains in a good place, get our attitudes in a good place, get our emotions in a good place, because you don't know what that child left behind at home that morning. You don't know if they weren't yelled out the door, yelled out the car. You don't know if they weren't fed that morning, because it happens so often. And I'm so sick of people acting like it doesn't happen, because it does. There are children who maybe went to school knowing that a loved one is dying or is ill, or maybe their dog died overnight, or, the list could go on and on. And it does, because it's life and we're humans, and that's what happens. So we need to be good ambassadors of humanity and decide to extend love and patience and care to every single human, so that when we go throughout our day, they started in that place and had it shown to them, so they can do it for others. And I've seen it happen, so don't tell me it can't, because I know that it can. Maybe a girl's on her period and needs to take care of something. Maybe somebody forgot a book at home and needs to make a phone call. I don't know what the case may be, but I can tell you right now that if you do this, the minute that they're in the school, they're a prisoner. No one is going to be excited to step inside your doors and learn. No one is going to come inside of your school with a good attitude, because they are all going to feel like they are at boot camp. And I don't know about you, but I don't want my kids enduring that kind of a day or that kind of experience, or starting their days in that way and coming home to me after experiencing that, and coming home to our family and other people in the world after experiencing that. And I know a lot of families that, you know, that's something that they don't have a choice, that they can't homeschool their kids like we do. They can't, you know, make choices that way. So they depend on these teachers and administrators to be the ones that are keeping their kids safe and their mentality protected, their mental well-being protected, you know. So that's important. There are people who spend good money to send their kids to private schools or military schools, and we have a military academy right here in our state in New Mexico. So I encourage this administrator to remind herself that this is a public institution and that parents didn't pay money or sign up for that, and that there are some rights being violated in this situation. And I do think that this person should be held accountable. I come back to the fact that when a person is presented with the idea of going to school or skipping school or being involved in maybe gang activity or smoking, you know, pot or doing whatever it is that they might be confronted with the possibility of doing, I feel pretty strongly that with the rules that are created in this school, that a lot of children are going to choose to not partake in school, that their education is going to be not a very high priority for them, because this is what they're seeing it means. And they're relating to it that, you know, it's like a boot camp and that they're a person with no rights. So I want to encourage this person to reevaluate that situation and instead maybe explain to these kids, because I know that there are children who don't exactly like go to class when they're supposed to, or, you know, whatever the case may be, but give them a breather in the morning, give them a minute to say hi to a friend, give them a minute before that bell actually rings. And then after that point, if that bell has rang and they are not in class and their butt is not in a seat and attentive and ready to learn, then that's when a self-consequence would kick in and a punishment would take place. The only thing is that punishment belongs to that student that disobeyed and broke the rule, not the entire class and student body. So that's when that would be an accountability taken by that student and by their parent, and then addressed by you, the administrator, towards them. And it would be in a respectful way still, because you don't have the right to publicly shame people for making mistakes either. And it would be something that would be dealt with and the consequences assigned. So I encourage you to find your way back to that, because I do think that it works, and I know it works in my house, and I know I've seen it work in the stores that I've managed, and for the teens and young adults and even older adults I have employed and managed. So there's that. The passing time between classes only 4 minutes now instead of 5. I don't understand why we can't give children 5 minutes of time in between classes. I don't see what the big deal is there. I don't understand why we can't give them a minute to say hey to a friend, or maybe they need to relay a message to their sibling, or maybe they need to change their shoes or change their pads, or take a Tylenol or go poop, or whatever the case may be. Or maybe they're hungry because they had a math test their first period and they need to get, you know, a snack bar out of their locker, or whatever the case may be. Like, you don't know. And 5 minutes is not too much to give somebody, to give them a chance to go from point A to point B and to have their mind have a minute to revamp and start fresh. I'm a grown adult and I can be on the phone paying a bill and need to get off that phone call and need 5 minutes to myself before I move on to the next task. Or maybe I am taking an exam for college, you know, maybe I'm back in school and I'm needing to do all these assignments, and you need a breather between one thing to another, plain and simple. That's humanity. That is extending decency and kindness and respect for everyone's well-being to one another. For those, again, that choose to loiter, not be in class when they're supposed to, or whatever the case may be, there is a self-consequence attached to that. There is an accountability measure taken for that, and that singular student is punished, and it's done respectfully and in a way that is within district guidelines, state guidelines, legal guidelines, and is done with discretion and respect like it should be. And it should be a matter between the student and their parent, and not the entire student body, and not done in front of the entire student body. That's disrespectful, and all it does is shame them publicly. I can tell you firsthand that doing that is just not kind, and it's not okay. And that people think that these really harsh lessons are good and fine, and that they are a good idea, but they're not. I was tardy sometimes to class, and my dad would get super upset, and on my report card he would just get mad, and it was a whole thing. And I got to a point where I didn't care anymore. Why? because the punishment given to me was so harsh and so irrelevant to the actual crime done, and there was no conversation had. It was just yelling and name calling and things of that nature, and a boot camp style, because my dad was from the military. But my punishment was to go to the plant where my dad worked and to clean restrooms where grown men and truck drivers went to the bathroom. And I can tell you right now that it was so degrading and so humiliating and so disgusting. And no. So I didn't care to remove my tardies at that point because, for one, my dad didn't even want to spend time with me just in a general sense of things. So that was the only time my dad spent with me, was through punishment. So it's not okay to, make kids feel like they are shamed or like they don't have rights or like they don't. If my dad would have had a conversation with me, I would have had some ideas in which, ways that I could have remedied my tardies. And then also in the same sense, some of it was sometimes I was just trying to get from my class to class, and I worked multiple jobs in high school, especially my senior year, and I graduated early. So sometimes I'd be up till 3 a.m. doing homework after closing at midnight at Smith's as a bagger. So I didn't exactly have this life of freedom, if you will. So that's just my thoughts on the passing period thing. Bathroom breaks are to be signed in through a bathroom log, and sometimes will be denied, is basically how it was made clear. And then also an escort would be coming to the classroom to get the child and take them to the bathroom. I'm sorry, but no. Kids are old enough to go to the bathroom on their own. Unless they request assistance, they should not be assisted in any form, and there doesn't need to be an adult alone with them in any context ever. I would like to say that all the adults in these situations are trustworthy, but let's be realistic and understand that that's not always the case. And sometimes you might be serving children on a silver platter to an adult that cannot behave themselves when they don't have eyes and ears on them. So unless you're going to have a group of adults to keep people accountable, I don't see how this is appropriate or even necessary or should be allowed. So that said, the lady in context that shared this video, her daughter had to go to the bathroom on her period with a male adult. And while I'm not one for segregating by gender, because my spouse is transgender and not choosing to transition, so I know what it means to be respected in that context, it's not appropriate for a grown adult man or a woman to be escorting someone to the bathroom. And there's a such thing as privacy and discretion. And I know that my daughters, excuse me, I have something in my hair and it's bugging me, but my daughters, the 3 of them are daughters, they I don't think any one of them would want to be escorted to the bathroom, and they're almost 15, 12, and 11, and they wouldn't want to have to get their pads or their tampons out, or to not have what they need, or to have an adult outside the door while they were trying to go to the bathroom and maybe were having a bellyache or cramps or a bladder issue or whatever the case may be. That's just no. I don't think that that's appropriate or necessary. And I will tell you right now that to deny a child the right to go to the bathroom, that shouldn't be allowed, and I'm not certain that it is. And we've always told our daughters that when they need to go, they need to go. So there was a time in a middle school in Utah that our daughter was denied the right and told no, and she just walked out because it was either that or pee her pants. And under no circumstance do I want my child to be reduced to peeing themselves in front of their classmates and be humiliated in that capacity, because that's something that they will never live down. And the bullying that would come from that would be fierce, simply because an adult felt that they weren't allowed the right to go to the bathroom and felt like they were powerful and could tell them no. So that's a no. And excuse me, because I need a drink myself. I also feel what's going to come from this is you're going to see an uptick of kids who don't use the restroom because they don't feel like they're being respected. They don't feel comfortable in front of another adult. You don't know that one of them wasn't raped as a child by an adult in a similar situation, or maybe touched, or whatever the case may be, because it happens, unfortunately, and it's really heartbreaking to say. But that said, there may be a situation where a child just isn't comfortable. So I think you're going to see an uptick in UTIs and other bladder issues, which then lead to other issues as an adult. And coming from somebody that has a bladder problem myself from childbirth and also just genetic, it's expensive and it costs a lot of time and effort and money to go to the doctor. So then it creates a stress later on a person financially and otherwise, and it's not okay. the bottom line is, can we not just let people go to the bathroom? Because I'm going to ask you, Miss Principal, how would you feel if we had you locked in your office for a while with, you know, no rights extended to you, and then maybe you weren't allowed to go to the bathroom when you asked, and that you had to be escorted by somebody? Maybe we should all come as adults and escort you to the bathroom. Sorry, but no. It also allows an opportunity for whoever that escort is to say something inappropriate to a child or harassive in nature to a child, and then it's their word against, you know, that administrator, and that's not acceptable either, because I know a lot of adults, and unfortunately I've seen teachers in this situation who don't behave with integrity or within, you know, the guidelines of what they should be. So no, no, and no. Now we're going to move on to the lunch situation. So lunch, these kids are expected, one of the rules is that they are going to go to the lunchroom, single file, no words, no talking, no nothing, which I can get behind, going, you know, from point A to point B in a quiet manner, and that the single line, like one behind the other, I don't understand. Like, get a grip. These are just kids, you know. But lunch, they are to get their lunch and go back to the classroom and sit in the place where they just left. They are not allowed the use of phones, and they are to talk in conversational voices, and that is it. And it has been said that there will be zero talking if needed. A few things. There have been multiple studies done that have addressed the part about eating lunch at your desk being incredibly unsanitary and really bad for you, and not great for your well-being overall, just physically and mentally. So I'm just going to say this. Every single body needs to be moving during the day. It's one reason why we're seeing an uptick in obesity and blood clots and all these other things, because people are sitting at their desks and not moving for long periods of time. And then we are teaching children that that's what they are to do. And let's be honest, when they're in middle school, they look like this. She's 11. She's still a child. She's really into peace signs right now. But the bottom line is that she inherently has a lot of energy. And because she has a lot of energy, she needs chances in the day to wear herself out and let that energy out. And you cannot expect a child to begin their day early in the morning and be a militant student, you know, and then... Yes, and you just interrupted me. They cannot be expected to be a militant student and work through their day and not have a break in between to even breathe or to make a choice for themselves. That is next to impossible, and you're putting a barrier on this child that is so deeply damaging that I can't even begin to cover all the ways in which it's going to harm them. It's abuse. Like, no other way to say it. Everyone needs sunshine. Everyone needs movement. It's been proven that it aids in anxiety, it aids in depression, it aids in a number of other things. And I come back to the fact that there are children who at lunch, especially in a community like Vernal, who maybe their dads work nights or their moms work nights as a nurse or whatever the case may be, and they don't even see them in the morning. Maybe say goodbye, I don't even know, not even that. And maybe lunchtime is their only opportunity to speak to their parent on the phone or to you know, have a conversation with them. So now we've removed that from them, and they get to never see their parents except for like the rare occasion that they have a day off, and who knows when that might be. And when they work shift work, there's a good chance that that parent's day off is on a Wednesday when their child's required to be in school. So something to consider. There are children who go to school and have ill family members, including their actual parents, or maybe they live with their grandparents and one of them is sick, and that's also incredibly heartbreaking, and they can't use the phone to speak to them or text them or whatever the case may be. Maybe they want to talk to their sister that's in college or their cousin that's in college. Maybe they want to talk to their neighbor. I don't know. Maybe they want to take pictures with their peers because that's the only time of the day that they get that opportunity to do so. And maybe they don't get to see their friends outside of school, because I'm just going to say that when it comes down to our kids, my spouse is only off. This is going to seriously bug me. My spouse is only off Saturday and Sunday. and has a very demanding job. And so sometimes our evenings are disrupted by that very demanding job. So that said, it puts us in a situation where Saturday and Sunday are very important to our family. And that's not time to be doing things with friends generally. And I even will decline invitations with other friends, limit my phone calls, whatever, because I want to be engaged and present with my family. And that's how that goes down. So now we're going to put these kids in a position where they don't get to have friends at school and have a social life and have any outlet whatsoever. But then they also, on the weekends, maybe don't have that either. And that's on top of if that kid's not being abused at home, is maybe being deprived of food because their parents can't afford it, or otherwise you don't know the situation. So I just would invite everyone to understand that not everything is a privileged middle class or upper class world, or even based on, privilege of race or anything of that nature. So that part really bothers me when it comes down to the phones. And then also I think of the teachers that need a breather. Maybe that teacher needs to pay a bill or make a doctor's appointment or attend a meeting, or maybe they want to listen to a podcast, and maybe a kid wants to listen to a podcast, or maybe you don't know, maybe that teacher wants to go smoke a cigarette. I don't know. But what I do know is that nobody should be held prisoner, and everyone should have a point in their day where they have the ability to make choices for themselves. So it's kind of a pick your battles situation where you've got this opportunity where there's rules and expectations and accountability that need to be met. And these kids should know this, and they should be accountable for it, and they should be following through. And if they're not, then obviously there's a self-consequence and a punishment that's attached to that. That's a no-brainer. And if you're not at that point with your students yet, you should be. I can see that there's already a huge disconnect between administration and students in the school just based on the way that she spoke to them in the video. That was absolutely apparent and disgusting and disturbing, and not just my words, but that of my children and other teenagers that got to watch the video as well. I come down to the point where if there's that small period in the day where you can allow a child to feel like they are capable and intelligent and able to make a choice for themselves, lunchtime is that time for them. That in other states, if they ban recess, it's illegal. So same goes for these kids. Like, they have energy to get out. They have socialization to do. They have things to process. They have emotions. They have complex relationships with themselves. They have complex relationships with their peers, with their parents. Maybe they have a significant other already because they might be dating. I personally don't want my kids dating at that age, but they are dating, let me tell you. And I know this because I talk to my kids and I talk to other people's kids, and they share with me the things that you don't allow them to share with you as either parents or administrators. So food for thought. I just think that it is really healthy to give kids a space to be allowed to be kids, to be inside of these formative years where they matter, and that, they are the center of the universe because they're still kids. Because I think a lot of this shift from elementary to pushing, these kids into middle school earlier, I'm not accepting of it. I'm going to be honest. I think it puts kids in a place where they have to grow up too soon. And I've watched it firsthand with these 9th graders that are in the high school now and are sexually active and doing a lot of other things that they would have not felt pressured to do in another social situation possibly. So another conversation for another video. But that said, these kids are inside of their formative years, and they still need to know that they can still be kids. They can make mistakes. They can be learning. They can be growing. And they should know that there's a person on the other side, that adult that's supposed to be guiding them. That adult should be in front of them with humility and grace and understanding and kindness and approachability, and less of a, you're going to do what I said because I'm the adult and I said so. Because I grew up with that, and I can tell you firsthand, no, it doesn't work. Yes, it does cause harm. Yes, it is abusive. And no, it doesn't shape you into a fine adult. Let me just make that abundantly clear. So I come into that I've managed teenagers in managing a store, multiple stores actually, and in having my own business, and in having a child myself that's a teenager. And I come back to the fact, and I'm going to go to my notes because I just don't want to forget anything, but more than anything, they need humility from us as adults, and they need a safe space to exist, to breathe, to speak their truth free of fear, which is huge, okay? Free of fear. Please take that in. To represent themselves through fashion, through their hairstyles, through their shoes, through their gender identity, through their dietary choices, their moral standpoints, their activism that they take part in, maybe, because kids are activists nowadays and kids are aware and they are speaking for themselves and they do have thoughts and feelings. So please take that in, adults. And that list goes on and on. And more than anything, they need a space in which it is acceptable to be allowed to stay inside of their still formative years and know that someone cares enough to know who they are, how they feel, and so much more, and to just love them and accept them, even when it's difficult, but just to do that and to guide them through the next points of life and being a better person or being just a good ambassador of humanity. Keep saying that. And in the retail world, we call this coaching. And in motherhood, I call this love. And I also feel a great responsibility to love other humans around me, no matter what their situation is, no matter how much trouble they've caused for themselves or others, no matter what. Love. I'll keep coming back to that. And then this school, it just seems non-existent, but also seems to be something that is vehemently denied to these students. And it seems to be paired with the abuse of the students' overall well-being and development. And I just can't get on board with that. I can't support it. I don't understand it. I don't understand why kids have to go back to a classroom and sit with people that they maybe don't like or maybe aren't comfortable around. Or maybe there's a student that just wants to sit alone. Maybe they just want a minute to breathe. My daughter used to walk around outside at the middle school, and like that's what she would do at lunchtime. She would give her lunch to a student regularly who didn't have it, even though I packed her a very nice lunch because we had food allergies in our house, so it was very particular food. And she would give this child her lunch, and sometimes would eat at school because of it, and other times would go without lunch so that another student could eat. So her means of walking off that hunger was like, that's how she coped, was walking it off, knowing she'd get to go home and eat at the end of the day, and maybe they wouldn't. There are kids who are going home and raising other kids because their parents work, or maybe because their parents are drug addicts and alcoholics. There are kids who are being beat when they go home, locked in closets. You don't know. And the fact of the matter is, this administrator should have had ample training to know these risks and these things that are a real possibility for these students. And she should have preemptively been thinking of the ways that these rules would affect these kids. And let's not single out the bad kids, the good kids and the bad kids, for one. But let's also not single out the good kids who are behaving themselves and then lost their rights too. So how am I to tell my kids at home to behave themselves and that this is their earned reward when there is no reward? That at this school, your reward is that you get your education, which that is a reward. Definitely not something extended to kids in other countries. That's not a lie. But there are inherent human needs and processes and capabilities and emotional things that come along with it, that for a lot of years, there were parents like mine who would tell me children are to be seen and not heard. That list is plenty, and I would hear it. And so I was voiceless at home. And if I did speak up, oh my gosh, you better watch out. Either it was going to come at me verbally or physically or both. And there are times I deserve to be in trouble, for sure. But there are also times that bar was up here and I was doing anything and everything I could to get there, and I'd reach the bar and the bar would be moved clear up here without any reward or any acknowledgement of the good work being done to get there, and I would be punished instead. So I don't agree with these rules, because it's stuff like this that makes kids get to their 20s and 30s, and you're in your 20s and you're working hard and you're going along and you're great and you're fine and you're good, and then one day, that's it. You crash, you burn, you start to realize where you're at with things and the anxiety that you've been pushing to the side, or maybe pushing onto other people and reflecting onto other people, and then that's it. You explode. And in light of the situation where we have endless school shootings and workplace shootings and just being at the mall shootings, I don't think it's a good idea to put people in a cage and expect them to be a lab rat. I don't agree with people having lab rats either. I'm vegan. I don't think anyone should be held in a space against their will to some extent. Going and getting your education is one thing, but to know that your rights are being stripped of you the minute you enter that door, and that you're not to talk, you literally are not to even maybe use the bathroom some days, and that you are just to breathe and memorize information and regurgitate it on a test and You're going to go home, rinse and repeat, and that's going to be your day. You're going to lose a group of children in their formative years. In fact, I honestly think that concerning being a good ambassador and citizen of humanity and being a good adult, that those are the years that are the most important. It's not necessarily when they're 3 and 4 and everyone thinks that that's the most important. I disagree. Having stayed at home with my children during that time and also being with my kids now, what they learn now in their middle school years, essentially into their teenage time and young adulthood into actual adulthood, and what I've seen through managing other teenagers and young adults is that this is it. This is the now. This is where you either make it or break it. This is where you win or you lose with them. This is where if a child feels like they are disrespected or feels that they don't have rights or feels like they can't even be who they are, this is where you lose them. And for some kids, that means that their light goes dark and they take their life. And don't even get me started on how unacceptable that is and how we are failing children left and right through these ways. So please give kids the space to be who they are. Please give them a minute to express themselves. Please give them a safe space to express themselves. Please just give them 5 minutes. You know, even the troubled ones, like they need 5 minutes. You know, maybe instead of punishment, they need somebody to have eye contact and one-on-one conversation with them. Maybe you go about having them help the janitors with things around the school so they have a respect for the space that they're in and how it stays clean. Maybe you have them help a teacher with something or yourself as the administrator with something. But the bottom line is you should always be going within these punishments, if you will, if that's what you want to call them, but within legal guidelines, within transparency and accountability, both to your licensure and the state laws, and then also with the parents being involved as well. So making a video and not sending it to the parents or not even having a meeting with parents, that's not appropriate on any level. And I don't know any other way to say that that's nice. And then this is all so much to take in that I am seriously in a place of I'm losing myself with it, and I'm sure that these parents are too. And that being said, I can't imagine how these kids feel. We are doing these things in this school, but then also I guarantee you these kids go home with homework. So that's another thing, is that they are having to be rigorous and militant and obedient, you know, in a way that's not necessarily necessary during their day at school, but then they're having to go home and do this homework and come back and do it all again. So I guess I'm trying to review my notes to make sure that I don't forget anything, because I don't want to ramble, but I do want to make an impact. You have an opportunity as an administrator or an administration as a whole. I'm welcoming you as Uintah School District to hear this and take it in. I expect that you're going to take it in with humility and respect, and that you're going to understand where it is that I'm coming from. But you have an opportunity to reach these kids in ways that are outside the box and unexpected, simply through being part of their day and their experience and their journey, and being someone who talks to them in a way that is respectful and not in a, you're going to do what I said because I'm the adult. And my dad one time locked one of my kids outside. This is why I don't have a relationship with my parents. One of the biggest reasons. He locked my child outside that's sitting next to me so that he could yell at my other child who had food allergies and wave food in front of her face and then say to her that he's big, she's little, and that he's smart and she's dumb. It was a very Matilda moment of him. I'm not sure that he recognizes that he did not come up with that unique thought, but nonetheless, he sat and yelled at our child and swore at her and said a lot of awful things to her while my mom sat and did nothing.
She was just watching.
Watching, yeah. And then they didn't admit it to us, didn't say anything, and it was our children who came forward. And why? Because they knew that what they experienced was not okay, and that it was not safe, and that it was not right, and that it was abuse, and that they were spoken to in a way that was not respectful of them or their bodies or their emotions or them as humans. And they came to us, granted the next day, because they were terrified that night with us being in front of my parents, and said what happened. And then I had to confront my parents about it. And I should have never had to do that, for one, and it broke my heart. That was the day that I knew that it was all done and over with. And my kids still to this day are hurt by it and damaged by it and affected by it, and feel uncertain in some situations with adults, where they feel like maybe they are powerless, or maybe they are not safe, or the list goes on. And so I welcome you as administrators to not allow it to be that kind of environment where somebody is very drill sergeant and I'm going to tell you what to do. Even the kids that cause the most trouble don't respond to that type of communication, punishment, reaction, all of it. They just don't. It's been proven across the board. I dare you to look up the studies on it, and I cannot believe that your administration is not being better trained and using better and more responsible choices when it comes to this. And again, I keep trying to go back to my notes, but I welcome you to maybe get involved in finding ways that these kids can do community service and get involved in those ways, and make the parents take part in that as well. Maybe you need a parent action committee that can meet with you and be part of this, and you can all come up with resolutions so that everybody is respected. But then also, it's not just about respect, it's about human rights that are legally extended to every single person that lives and breathes as a human being. And this is where I feel like your set of rules is going to steer you very, very wrong, and you're going to have a very ugly lawsuit on your hands if you're not careful and the right person chooses to get a lawyer or contact the right agency or whatever the case may be, or one of your adults behaves poorly as a, staff member or teacher, whatever the case may be. It's not okay. So get to know your kids, speak to them, ask them if maybe they're troubled at home, ask them if they eat every day, ask them how they feel about themselves. Maybe the person's acting out because maybe they were born a male, but they want to be a female and they're struggling with how to communicate that. And if they did say it at home, they'd be kicked out, or they'd be abused, or both, or you just don't know. You don't. Just like your students don't know that maybe you had the worst fight of your life with your spouse and your marriage is ending, or maybe you yelled at your child and feel ashamed of yourself, or maybe you feel proud. I don't know. But nobody knows. Nobody knows if you miscarried a baby. Nobody knows if you are struggling with fertility. These are all very real things that are very real for you as an adult. And so I need you to ground yourself and realize that there are children that are going through very similar things, if not more difficult, because they are children who should not be having to comprehend life's problems the way that they are nowadays. It is not the way that it was. I mean, there were kids definitely abused and not fed and all these other things when I was a child, but it has risen in number in a very disturbing and alarming way. And then also we live in a time where everything is more expensive and parents are having to work extra hard to make ends meet to barely afford to keep a roof over their head. You don't know that the child that you're not disciplining didn't spend the night in a shelter last night. One of my employees was an aide for a kindergarten class, and one of the things that she struggled with this one particular student behaving and just consistently being high energy, like out of control. And this person was a very regimented person who didn't have children, so she didn't understand it from any patient standpoint whatsoever. And she really maybe shouldn't have been working with kindergartners if this is the case, constantly. But that said, that child came to her one day in the middle of misbehaving and said, I spent the night at Child Haven last night. Child Haven in our community is a shelter that parents, if they get in a domestic violence dispute and the parents get taken to jail, the kids get taken there. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons why they end up there, but none of them are pleasant for the kid or good. Child Haven aims to make it a good experience for the child and a safe one. So there is that. But that kid literally had the brevity to say to this grown adult who was, scolding them, that I spent the night at Child Haven last night. So do the math. Have more school involvement in a context where it's an entire school involvement, that we're all in the cafeteria together and we're all communicating. Maybe you have a mix it up lunch period where everybody eats, and then you have like maybe once a month you all meet in the lunchroom and eat your lunch with your friends, but then you mix it up and you move along to people who you don't know. Or, there's a lot of different ways that this could go down. I have a lot of in my mind, ways that I would, function this. For our house, when our kids fight, we have sister circle where they sit together, and it could be called sibling circle to keep it in a non, binary, gender neutral way, where our kids hold hands and they're not allowed to say anything about the person's physical appearance to compliment them, but they have to say something kind or well-meaning or nice or a combo of all the things. And I can tell you firsthand that it has oftentimes resulted in the children, we have 3 kids, 3 girls, and they have left the circle crying before, and not crying because they're in trouble, crying because something happened in that circle that was beautiful and well-meaning and changed them and shaped them and shifted them and jolted their soul. So those are the things that I've watched in my own kids. I've watched it in other teenagers. Please just talk to them. Please allow them to be kids, because they are middle school age. They are just kids still. They are just learning their way still. They are in bodies that want to do this all day long, and they now have TikTok. So there's some funny videos on the internet of shopping with some teenagers that are not wrong to an extent, where these kids are just this all day, While I agree that that's not an appropriate thing for it to be going on all day long, it's also not a crime. So maybe if we could just, spend 5 minutes getting the wiggles out and then readjusting, being mindful of the fact that there are children with autism and other things that go on in their bodies mentally and physically that don't allow them to function in the same way as another person, and extending them the space and respect to be exactly who they are and not shaming them or making them feel different. None of those rules that were presented addressed anybody's rights that may be disabled or may have a different way of thinking or functioning. They were very disrespectful, and I don't want my children in that school. And my spouse grew up an hour and a half away from there, and our kids have been in a school an hour and a half away from there, and I'm appalled that this has taken place in the state of Utah. I'm appalled that no one seems to know about it outside of the parents, and it's only the parents that have had it brought to their attention. So that just tells me how that went down with the administration. So to the principal, if you have another view on this that you'd like to discuss and you want me to discuss on my video or what I share, I'd be really happy to discuss that with you. But I think more than anything, what I'd like to see from you is an apology to your students for acting in a way that violated their rights and violated your trust with them and their trust with you. And I would like to see you interacting with your students more, because it's very apparent that you don't. It's very apparent that there's a very strong disconnect between yourself and your students, and your entire student body. It's very apparent that you're just into a militant behave or else way of being. And while that existed while maybe you and I were kids, it isn't the case now. And there have been many psychological studies to back it up and to back up why it's harmful and why it doesn't work, and it doesn't. So I guess that's it. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm sure I'll think of something else. I am going to write a letter to Uintah School District that I'm going to publish online as well. And I'm going to send that to them in the mail, to their administration. And I'm going to find several administrators to send it to, the ones that it's very pertinent. And then I also welcome you again as parents to contact the necessary organizations and probably media outlets. I feel like it should be shared with them as well, being honest. And I know a few people who work in this industry who I could get this information to also. So I encourage you to allow your children to think for themselves, to speak for themselves, and to know when their rights have been violated, and to know that they matter. And for those of you who are at home and actively parenting and speaking with your kids, make sure to just remind yourself that you're doing a good job for doing those things, and that your kids are needing to hear extra amounts of love and affirmation and encouragement and motivation, and a safe place to be and to speak and to present themselves as who they are, because clearly those rights are being diminished and taken from them at school, and they need that safe space. And everybody have a great day. And if anything changes or happens, I will make another video to update.